Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 67th episode of the Inbox, starting off with a question from Shane Schuler saying, how does piloting a ship for an org work? If I purchase a ship for my organization and I have 8 ships in my transport fleet, I may want to hire an NPC or a player to fly as a fighter as protection. Could I not have a pilot fly my ship without it being stolen? Would I need to specifically report stolen ships to the UEE? Okay, so with this, I think there's going to be the ability to, fly a ship for anybody in your organization. And we do know that you're going to be able to hire an NPC to fly a fighter as an escort, or potentially just fly another ship in your convoy. So that is an ability that we have. Now, as far as specifics, as far as the organization go, there should be some ability to actually loan out ships. The question then becomes, how does that transfer of temporary ownership actually happen? And I think what you'll probably need to do is, go to your ship, pull it, then actually land where that person is and maybe get out. The other option is potentially there's more advanced things that are maybe involved within a organization, where maybe you could say, come back to my hangar and grab this ship, or, go to this terminal and you can queue up the ship here and I'm going to grant you access to it through, your mobi-glass. There's a couple different ways that can play out, but what we do know is that you have the ability to loan ships to people, as well as potentially even having organization-wide fleets to where you can say the organization owns this ship. So now anybody in the organization, maybe of a certain tier, is able to actually take that ship out and fly it. Now, as far as actually, could I not pilot my ship and have it not stolen? There's nothing that's going to stop your ship from being stolen. If you hire an NPC to fly a ship for you, and that NPC is disabled by, a pirate, and that pirate gets out and takes your ship's gone. It's the same thing. So it doesn't matter if you're flying it, if somebody else flies it. If your ship is out of the hangar, you have the possibility of losing it due to piracy. As far as would you need to report it specifically to the UEE, it's probably not the UEE. That's like reporting your car being stolen to the U.S. Navy. The alternative would probably be you need to report it to like maybe the advocacy or local militia or something like that. The militia is a poor example too. The advocacy is kind of like the FBI in a way. Chances are you're just going to need to report it to your insurance company, and they'll probably take it from there, and then it'll be replaced after a certain amount of time. Andrew Young says, ASDL, longtime viewer and guildmate, thank you. How do you feel about drone boats? The game is nowhere near EVE Online, but I know plenty of people who love to use a small army of remote control snub fighters. I think having one could possibly get some people interested in the game if they were to implement it. How would you suggest they should do it? Completely computerized, or have some remote pilots flying from the command ship? I don't think you're going to see anything on a large scale in this regard. There's a few ships out there that are supposed to have some drones of certain levels. For example, I think the Carrack is supposed to have some drones. The Reclaimer is supposed to have some drones. So I think there are going to be some small things like that may actually be in the game, but I think it's almost all going to be automated. I don't think you're going to drop out some military ship and have all these tiny little ships, almost like a StarCraft fighter or carrier, actually deploying drones to be engaged. It's really supposed to be more of a first-person space environment, and I think based on that, it's more focused on you actually flying the ships. So if they were to do that, I don't really know how they would implement it. I don't think it's going to be something that we see on a regular basis. Honestly, I don't think it's something that a ton of people are interested in. I think I've heard it just a couple times. So I think it kind of depends on where you're actually talking about it. But remote-controlled snub fighters, I don't think is going to really be a thing. You have snub fighters today, and they're all piloted ships. And I think, Roberts has said before that he's not a fan of like AI and robots and those types of things. And I think this kind of crosses into that territory. So from a highest level direction, I don't think they're going to say, yes, let's go ahead and implement that into the game. Anti-Chris says, what do you think can be done about player-controlled characters constantly running around in public areas, Ark, Corp, Levski, etc.? I understand that players in general would like to get their business out of the way by tending to get from one sort to another rather quickly rather than slowly. That said, it's such an immersion killer seeing dozens of avatars unrealistically zooming from one end of the area to the other without losing a beat. What kind of systems could you see being put into place to mitigate this? I don't see anything being done about it, to be completely frank, because I don't think it necessarily matters. I mean, to a certain extent, yes, you're right. The immersion in the game is important, and I think that's something CIG wants to really, bolster up as much as they possibly can. But at the same time, I always go back to this. They preach gameplay over realism. And it may not be realistic to see a bunch of people sprinting around a landing zone or something like that. But people are doing that because they're in a hurry. This isn't your full-time job. You're not actually a space pilot, as much as I hate saying that. But, when I sit down, I've maybe got 3 hours to play. And I'm not going to just walk through a landing zone because I think it's going to improve other people's immersion. If I've got 3 hours to play, I'm going to be running my ass off trying to get everything done. Now, about the only thing I could see being put into place is potentially something like a stamina system. You're probably not going to end up being able to sprint all the time, so maybe you're going to end up running out of, energy. You're going to have to slow down. Maybe if you're sprinting, you go through things like if there ends up being like a food and water and energy system, then maybe you end up having to kind of eat a little bit more if you're taking that kind of exercise. But again, I don't think there's going to be anything that's put into place, frankly. I mean, it may be done, but I haven't seen anything to this point to make me think it's going to happen. Hinchel says, hey, I don't know if this has been asked before, but when a cargo comes, how is it going to be delivered to ships? Are we able to buy forklifts to load cargo because carrying them to take a long time? So in the first iteration of cargo, it's probably going to be like point and click. I'm showing up, I want to load my ship with cargo, and boom, it kind of magically appears. Like the Elite Dangerous approach. There's going to be different developments as this goes on at different scales. So we can start out with maybe saying, if you're exploring and you happen to find a weapons crate, you can get out, grab the weapon out of the crate and put it on your ship, and boom, you've suddenly got some cargo. Or, even like a big Benny's container, if it's an EVA, you can push it. So like those types of things I think are going to be in place from day one, but as far as actually loading and unloading, I bet we get a really watered down version of cargo to start. As far as things developing from there, they're developing like forklifts, so you can actually, go and load your ship with things like forklifts and like dollies and stuff. You can also hire NPCs to do that for you. And then on larger scales, you may show up to like a dock with like a whole sea, and then you can pay that dock to actually do the unloading for you, which would mean that they probably come with like Argos and other different types of vehicles that can help facilitate that in a more effective way. So in the short term, I think it's going to be very simple. In the long term, you can either pay to have people help you out with it and it'll be much faster, or you can do it on your own. It'll be cheaper, but it'll take forever. David False says, question for the inbox, do we know about ships being able to operate underwater? No. I think it's something we assume can maybe happen theoretically, but I don't necessarily think it's anything we see in the short term and maybe even in the long term. If you want to look at it from different ways, water is very dense. I mean, it's a much different environment than space. And sure, we've got shields, so you should probably be fine. But, that ongoing penetration is probably something that could be problematic. Ballistics, for example, can penetrate through shields. So water that's just sitting there with continued pressure might be able to do the same thing. It would be slow going. Then we could just say things like, that's not what the shields are optimized for. And it would be a really complicated thing to develop. So I just don't think that's something that's going to be happening in the long term. Maybe at the extreme long range of the game, it might end up happening, but I just don't see it happening. Sheep says, are there any more capital Corvette-sized ships in the pipeline? I'm not too happy with the Caterpillar and was looking at the Polaris as a replacement for more shields and firepower. The only other, capital ship that I've seen from the human race is going to be the Pegasus escort carrier. That should be a very, very big ship and would be a hell of an upgrade from the Caterpillar. Now, there are going to be other races of ships, like the Vanduul have a bunch of capital ships that'll be making it into the game. Do we have the ability to buy those or not? Probably not. The Banu should have some big ships. The Xi'an should have some big ships. So we don't really know as far as those coming down the line if we're going to have the ability. That being said, if you were buying a Caterpillar, it was probably somewhat based on the fact that it was a flexible ship with a lot of options and it's on the larger size of more civilian ships. I would keep an eye out for the Banu Merchantman. At $250 right now, it is one hell of a deal for what you get out of the ship, and I think it can do a lot of what the Caterpillar is able to do. So if you're not happy with the Cat, I would hang tight and take a look for that the Merchantman when it comes around. Otherwise, the Polaris is a great ship. I'm really excited about it. I have one in my fleet, and I can't wait to fly it. And our last two questions are patron questions, starting out with Sketchy. Do you think characters will be able to move between accounts? No, I don't. I think they're going to be very much locked to that account, and I think that's partially based on the reputation system that we're going to have, as well as just simplifying things like serialized variables and ownership of items and everything that's going to be associated to your character as part of persistence. So I don't think you're going to say, my character Jim is going to move from my STLYoungblood account to my Blackblood account, because then all of a sudden it complicates that reputation system. So I think characters are probably going to end up being locked to the account they're associated with. Ships ships are a little bit different because that's not a person, that's not a reputation. That ship itself is a item in the game, and I think those can move around through buying and selling, but characters are people and they're not going to fall into that same category. And the last question from Rockseeker, will we be able to quantum jump anywhere within a system, or will we be limited to certain regions of space like near planets, moons, or asteroids? I have no reason to believe that we wouldn't be able to jump anywhere in space. You know, exploration is going to kind of dictate that we need to be able to do that. So if that's the case, you should be able to end up anywhere. Not to mention, if people are kind of roaming around and exploring and they need help, you should be able to get their coordinates and jump to their location, or manually put in coordinates and get to a different location. But even today in the PU, we can actually quantum jump to any random location. You don't need to use those like icons when you open up the quantum menu. You know, so I don't think there's going to be restrictions there. I think it's going to have to be open based on the type of gameplay and the size and the scale and all the detail. I think the points of interest that are by planets and moons and space stations and asteroids are going to be the most common, but that's not going to be the only thing you can do. So there you have it. That's an episode of The Inbox. If you guys have questions, please let me know. Otherwise, stay tuned for more, and I'll catch you guys later. Take care.